I call Matt Ducey.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise and speak for the first reading of the Social Housing Reform Transaction Mandate Bill. Mr Speaker, I don't believe for 1 second that member, Phil Twyford, believes in actually what he just said. Can I quote Mr Twyford? Mr Twyford said, "Tenants with high and complex needs may be better off being transferred to a community housing provider." I don't believe for a second, Mr Speaker, that member, Phil Twyford, believes just what he said. Mr Twyford said, I quote, "What does this bill do? It shifts housing stock out of the hands of Housing New Zealand into the community housing sector." This is something that Labor is perfectly comfortable with. So it was all right back then that you were comfortable with, but not now. And if I can, Mr Speaker, I'd like to go back to that period up to the election 2014 to think about the pledges that the parties gave in campaigning and to think about the mandate this government has with this policy around social housing. If we look at our pledge, Mr Speaker, for National, the first one, free up land for new sections. Well, I know, Mr Speaker, in my electorate, we've done exactly that. With the Land Use Recovery Plan, we've been able to free up land, which is increased supply, which is equal demand. When you look at statistics like annual house price inflation, New Zealand has 7.5%. Canterbury has 5.5%. and Waimak has 3.5%. We're the third biggest district in the South Island, just taken over Invercargill. We're the third fastest growing electorate by population, yet we only have 3.5% annual house price inflation. And that is because, Mr Speaker, like I'm referring to, with our housing policy, going into that election, it was about freeing up land for new sections. The next one, Mr Speaker, was about keeping interest rates low. And we know we have some of the lowest interest rates in 50 years. Well, I'm getting to that. And the third one, Mr Speaker, was about introducing the KiwiSaver Home Start Package, which we've done. 3 out of 3. Stay with me, 3 out of 3. And here we move into it. The fourth one, reform the social housing sector, facilitating a shift from state housing to a range of new social housing providers. Mr Speaker, we pledged our housing portfolio and our promises. We got the mandate from the New Zealand people at the last general election, and we're sticking with it, and we're delivering it. Unlike Mr Twyford, who says what he wants and then he's backtracked on it. And what we've done, Mr Speaker, is we clearly set out that path at the election, and the first opportunity that we've had to deliver in Budget 2015, that's exactly what we've delivered. Social housing reforms, with the reform that allowed an extra 3,500 New Zealanders gain access to social housing. Extra wraparound services for vulnerable Kiwis, who will get extra support around education, training, employment, mental health, alcohol and drugs to support them into dependence, on top of the Children in Hardship Bill. And the list goes on, Mr Speaker, because what we've done is stuck with our promises, because the people of New Zealand trust us and have confidence in us to deliver what is right for the people. And that's exactly what we're doing, Mr Speaker. Because we listen to people, we care for them, and we're the working people's party, Mr Speaker. And when you look at statistics at Housing New Zealand at the moment, in Housing New Zealand, they have one-bedroom houses. There's a 25% demand with only a 9% supply. 25% demand, 9% supply. When you look at three-bedroom houses, 24% demand, with 43% supply. You can see where there's big houses, there's only a small number of people in them, and the housing is not meeting the demand, Mr Speaker. It's about the right house to the right people at the right time and the right location. And that's what we're working towards, Mr Speaker, a systemic approach. And Mr Speaker, if they talk about housing, they might want to talk about the Red Army. They're not talking about the Chinese. They're not even talking about the Canadians. It's the red under the bed that go to bed every night holding their Communist Manifesto under their pillow by Karl Marx, dreaming of the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, of state intervention, going to bed with great dreams of state intervention, as if they've forgotten about the revolution of the liberal market economy. And that's where we are, Mr. Speaker. We are in a mixed economy of care. A mixed economy of care where we have private provision, government provision, community provision, NGO provision. Flexible, and it gives people choice, Mr. Speaker. Because what we do in this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, is we back communities. We believe in big communities, Mr. Speaker. And to all those innovative community organisations, we believe in you. We're here to support you and the aspiration you provide for your tenants, to give them vision and to give them hope, Mr. Speaker. The social housing reform program, Mr. Speaker, when you look at some of the statistics, 3,650 people assessed as high needs waiting to be on the list for social housing. It's not working, Mr. Speaker. Things had to change, and it's right that they are, Mr. Speaker. And I'm proud that I'm part of a government that's sticking up and putting people first, Mr. Speaker. And that's what this is about. 1,300 tenants on Housing New Zealand have applied to transfer to better houses that suit their needs. A third of Housing New Zealand properties are in the wrong place and the wrong size. And the tenants are becoming more complex. A third of them are sole parent families with children, over 20% over 65 years, Mr. Speaker. And what we need to do is think through with community housing providers about how they provide new, innovative ways to support the complex needs of their tenants. And what we know, Mr. Speaker, is that with this bill we'll be looking to transfer 1,500 houses with existing tenants and tenancies as part of this mandated bill. Mr. Speaker, when we look at the regulatory impact statement, it outlines clearly two options. Option one is to ensure that the Crown has the authority to transact Housing New Zealand Corporation stock by means of a new asset transfer provision. The preferred legal mechanism is a transaction mandate. That's exactly what this bill was about, Mr. Speaker, a transactional mandate. The option two was to commence the program underneath the existing legislative framework of Housing New Zealand. The regulatory impact statement came back for this bill, the transactional mandate, and said there is no or minor impact on tenants as a result of selecting one option. Option one provides benefits to potential bidders as it provides certainty that the transfers can proceed. It showed, Mr. Speaker, that if we had gone for impact, the analysis on two, it would not have worked, Mr. Speaker. Because what we know, Mr. Speaker, is that at the end of the day, the social housing reform program has a range of objectives. That's right. And the first objective is ensuring that people who need housing support can access it and receive housing social services that meets their needs. I've talked about those statistics already, Mr. Speaker, of the range of bedrooms that aren't meeting the needs of the people on the waiting list. It's also about those people who need wraparound services, Mr. Speaker. Employment, training, education. What we're trying to do, Mr. Speaker, is move people into independence. We know people benefit from being independent. They become productive members of society. It's not only about getting them into employment, it's about getting them into independent housing, Mr. Speaker. It's a great bill and I commend it to the House. Thank you. Well done.